Don't eat that. Those three words, spoken barely above a whisper by an 80-year-old woman with flour on her apron, and a trembling jaw stopped the most feared biker in Arizona from swallowing a mouthful of poisoned food. Clara Bennett didn't scream. She didn't call 911. She walked straight up to a man covered in tattoos, a man every cop in 3 counties was terrified of, and knocked his breakfast plate off the table. Nobody moved. Because in that silence, everyone in the diner understood one thing: this old woman had just saved a dead man's life. If this story moves you, please subscribe to our channel and follow Clara and Ryder's story all the way to the end. And drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. The plate hit the floor at 6:07 in the morning. The sound of ceramic shattering against tile cut through the diner like a gunshot. Every head turned. The 3 bikers at the corner booth were on their feet before the echo died. The trucker by the window choked on his coffee. The teenage waitress behind the counter pressed herself flat against the wall and stopped breathing entirely. And Ryder Kane, president of the Hells Angels Red Mesa chapter, 6 feet 2 inches of weathered muscle and cold reputation, sat very, very still. He looked at the wreckage of his breakfast on the floor. Black coffee pooling around, broken ceramic, steak and eggs scattered across the tile, rye toast face down like a fallen soldier. Then he looked up at Clara Bennett. Clara was 80 years old. She weighed maybe 120 pounds. Her white hair was pinned back the same way it had been every morning for the past 11 years she'd owned this diner. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were completely steady. "What," Ryder said very quietly, "did you just do?" It wasn't really a question. It was the kind of tone that made grown men reconsider every decision they'd made that morning. Clara didn't flinch. "I just saved your life," she said, "whether you appreciate it or not." The 3 bikers at the corner booth moved toward her immediately. The biggest one, a man they called Decker, was already reaching across the counter. Hey, old woman." "Decker." Ryder's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Sit down." Decker stopped. Ryder pushed back his chair slowly, stepped over the mess on the floor, and stood directly in front of Clara. He was close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. He studied her face for a long moment, looking for what she didn't know. Guilt, maybe, or fear. He wasn't going to find either. "Talk," he said. "The gravy," Clara said. "When I was walking the plate over, I caught a smell, faint, like metal, and something sweet underneath it. I know that smell, Mr. Kane. I've known it for 40 years. She paused. "And right before I came out of the kitchen, I saw a white powder residue on the edge of the counter near the warming shelf. Very small. Someone who didn't know what they were looking at would have missed it entirely." Ryder stared at her. "You're telling me someone poisoned my food?" "I'm telling you someone tried to," Clara said. "There's a difference. One of those ends your morning. The other one ends with you finding out who did it." The diner had gone completely silent. Nobody was pretending to eat anymore. The trucker hadn't touched his coffee since the plate hit the floor. The teenage waitress, her name was Britt. She'd been working there 4 months, had her hand over her mouth. Ryder turned slowly and looked at his 3 men. "Nobody leaves this room," he said. Then he looked at Clara. "Show me." They went into the kitchen together, Ryder, Clara, and Decker right behind them, whether Ryder wanted him there or not. Clara walked directly to the warming shelf and pointed to the edge of the counter without touching it. The residue was still there, a faint dusting, white and fine, barely visible unless you were looking for it. Decker leaned in close. "That could be anything. Could be flour." "It's not flour," Clara said flatly. "I've been cooking in this kitchen for 11 years. I know where the flour goes and where it doesn't." She looked at Ryder. "Someone was in here this morning who had no business being in here." Ryder's jaw tightened. "How long ago did you open 5:30? Who was in the building between 5:30 and when I walked through that door?" "Me, Britt, my cook Eddie, but he called in sick this morning." Clara paused. "And a man I didn't recognize who came in around 5:50 and said he was from the food supply company, said he needed to check on a refrigeration unit in the back." The silence that followed that sentence was a different kind of silence than before. "And you let him in," Ryder said. "He had a clipboard and a uniform shirt. I had no reason not to." Clara's voice was steady, but something flickered behind her eyes. Not guilt, something older than guilt. I know, but I had no way of knowing then what I know now." Ryder was already moving back through the kitchen door into the dining room. He scanned the room in a single sweep. 9 people total, 3 of his men, the trucker, Britt, 2 elderly women at a table near the window who had not moved since the plate hit the floor and appeared to be in a state of complete shock, and 2 men at a small table near the far wall who had been there when Ryder arrived and had been very carefully not looking at him the entire time. One of them was now standing up very quietly and moving toward the door. "Hey," Decker said. The man walked faster. "Hey." This time it wasn't Decker. It was Ryder. The man hit the door at a near run and walked straight into the 2 bikers who had been parked outside and had come in the moment they heard the plate break. He bounced off the larger one like he'd walked into a wall. They brought him back inside. He was maybe 35, average height, average build, the kind of face you forgot 10 minutes after you saw it. He was dressed in ordinary clothes, jeans, a gray jacket. He was trying very hard to look calm, and the sweat running down the side of his face was making that difficult. Ryder pulled a chair into the center of the room and looked at the man for a long time without saying anything. "Sit down," he finally said. "I don't know what's happening," the man said. "I was just having breakfast." "Sit down." He sat. Ryder held out his hand to Decker without looking away from the man. Decker understood immediately. He patted the man down fast and efficiently and came back with a wallet, a set of car keys, and a burner phone. He laid them in Ryder's outstretched hand. Ryder flipped open the wallet. The ID inside was a Nevada license. The name meant nothing to him. He looked at the cash, $400 in mixed bills, which was a lot of money to carry into a desert diner at 6 in the morning. Then he turned on the burner phone. There was one photo in the gallery. It was a picture of Ryder's table taken through the diner window. His usual corner, his usual seat. The image was time-stamped 5:48 a.m. 12 minutes before he'd even arrived. The man in the chair had stopped trying to look calm. Ryder set the phone down on the table in front of him and pulled a chair over and sat directly across from him. Close. Not aggressive, just close, the way a man sits when he wants you to understand that there is nowhere left to go. "Let's start simple," Ryder said. "Who sent you?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "That's the wrong answer." "I want a lawyer." "You're not under arrest," Ryder said pleasantly. "You're just having a conversation. With me, in this diner, while my friends stand by the door." He leaned forward slightly. "Who sent you?" The man looked at the door. He looked at Decker. He looked at his hands. "I don't know his real name," he said finally. "I got a call 3 days ago. Cash payment up front, more on delivery. They told me what to put in the food and how much and where you always sit." "Who told you?" "A middleman. I never met the actual client." "What did they use?" The man blinked. "What? The powder. What was it?" "I don't know exactly. They gave it to me in a sealed packet and told me it was untraceable and it would look like a heart attack." Clara had been standing at the edge of the room listening. At those words, she made a small sound, barely audible, and pressed her hand flat against her sternum for a moment. Ryder glanced back at her. She met his eyes and gave a small nod like she was confirming something she'd already suspected. "It's called potassium cyanide compound," she said quietly. "Mixed with something to delay the onset, probably 30 minutes before you felt anything. By then you'd be on the road alone and it would look exactly like cardiac arrest." She paused. "A man, your size, your age, nobody would question it." The room was absolutely silent. Ryder looked at her for a long moment. "Then how do you know that?" "Because my husband spent 22 years as a field medic in places where people poisoned each other for political reasons," Clara said. "And because he made sure I knew the difference between what could save a person and what could kill one." She held his gaze. "I have been looking at that compound for 40 years, Mr. Kane. I knew it the moment I smelled it." Ryder stood up slowly. He nodded to Decker, who took up a position behind the man in the chair. Then Ryder walked to the counter and poured himself a cup of coffee, not the one that had been on the table, a fresh one, and stood with his back to the room for a moment thinking. Clara watched him. She'd been watching him carefully since the moment he walked in, the same way she'd watched him every Tuesday and Thursday morning for the past 2 years. She knew his routine. She knew how he took his coffee. She knew the way he scanned a room when he entered it, always checking exits first, always noting who was where before he sat down. She'd noticed over time the small habits of a man who had been careful for a very long time and was still alive because of it. She had noticed other things too, things she kept to herself, things she wasn't sure she'd ever find the right moment to say. Today apparently was going to be that day. "Mr. Kane," she said. He turned around. "There's something else you should know." Her voice was very even. "About why this is personal to me. Not just because you're my customer and someone tried to use my kitchen to kill you." Ryder waited. Clara wiped her hands on her apron, a nervous habit one she'd had since she was a young woman, and walked behind the counter. She bent down and opened a drawer at the far end, the one nobody else ever touched, and took out a small object wrapped in a piece of old cloth. She set it on the counter in front of Ryder. He looked at it, then he looked at her. "Open it," she said. He unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a lighter, old silver engraved. The engraving on the front was a compass, rose the same one worn by certain men who'd served in certain places during certain decades when no one asked questions about what they did afterward. On the back, 3 initials, J. D. K. Joseph Douglas Kane. Ryder's hands went very still. He had seen that lighter before. He had seen it in a memory he'd spent 30 years trying to put somewhere quiet, somewhere it couldn't reach him at night. His father's hands, the click of the wheel, the flame in the dark of a motel parking lot, 2 men standing 10 feet apart, not able to bridge the distance between them, no matter how much time passed. The last time he'd seen his father alive. "Where did you get this?" Ryder said. His voice was different now, stripped of the careful flatness he usually kept over everything. "He left it to me," Clara said, "in his will." Ryder raised his eyes from the lighter and looked at her. Really looked at her this time, not the way a man looks at a diner owner or at a witness to a crime, but the way a man looks when he's trying to see through 30 years of absence and understands something that had been invisible to him his entire life. We were married for 9 years, Clara said. After your mother, after you." She held his gaze. "He never stopped talking about you, Mr. Kane. Not once. Not in all the time I knew him." The diner was so quiet you could hear the desert outside, the faint hiss of wind against the windows, the distant sound of a truck on the highway. Ryder set the lighter down on the counter very carefully, like it was something that might break. "He never told me about you," he said. "I know," Clara said. "He was afraid you wouldn't." She stopped, started again. "He was afraid." Ryder picked up the lighter again, turned it over once, set it back down. The compass rose, caught the light. "He died thinking I hated him," Ryder said. It wasn't accusatory, it was just a fact laid out with the particular exhaustion of a man who'd carried something heavy for a very long time. "He died knowing you were alive and doing what you thought was right," Clara said firmly. "That's not nothing. That's not small." The man in the chair had gone so still he might have stopped breathing. Decker and the others were watching Ryder with the careful sidelong attention of men who had never seen their president look like this and weren't sure what to do with what they were seeing. Clara slid the lighter across the counter toward Ryder. "He'd have wanted you to have it," she said. "I've been waiting for the right moment. I didn't know when that would be." She almost smiled. "I didn't expect it to be this particular morning." Ryder picked up the lighter, closed his fist around it. He stood like that for a moment. Then something shifted in his face. The grief folded back. The careful flatness returned, but it was different now. Not empty, just controlled. And underneath it something hot and quiet that looked a great deal like fury. "The poison wasn't just about killing," he said slowly. He wasn't talking to Clara anymore. He was thinking out loud, and everyone in the room recognized the quality of that voice. The voice of a man whose mind had just locked onto something. It was about where I'd be when it hit, alone on the road, no witnesses, no connection back to the diner. He looked at the man in the chair. "They knew my routine. They knew exactly where I sit, exactly what I order, and exactly what time I leave." He paused. "This has been planned for a while." The man in the chair swallowed hard. "And the middleman," Ryder continued, "you said he paid cash, called you 3 days ago." He picked up the burner phone from the table. "Is this the number he called from?" "I don't know," the man said. "He used different numbers each time." "But you kept the phone." Silence. "Why did you keep the phone?" Ryder said very quietly. The man said nothing. Ryder set the phone back on the table and looked at Decker. Decker nodded. "Because Ryder said someone told you to keep it. Someone told you that after it was done, you were supposed to send a confirmation message. And you didn't send it yet because it hasn't been done yet." He paused. "Which means someone is still waiting." and right now they don't know it went wrong. The man's face confirmed everything. The burner phone on the table buzzed. One text message. No name. No number that meant anything. Just 4 words on the screen. Is it finished yet? Ryder looked at that message for a long moment. Then he looked at Clara. Clara looked back at him with the steady eyes of a woman who had outlived a war, a marriage, a grief, and this particular Tuesday morning. You need to call the police, she said. I know, Ryder said. But you're not going to, not yet. Not yet, he agreed. Clara picked up the coffee pot and refilled her own cup and didn't say anything else. Because she understood the way she had always understood things about men like this, that there was a moment between knowing and acting where a person had to be left alone with what they just learned. Ryder Kane had just learned that someone wanted him dead badly enough to plan it, carefully pay for it up front, and use the one place in the world he felt something close to safe to do it. He had also just learned that the woman who saved his life had known his father, and that his father for 9 years had eaten breakfast with someone who looked at a table and noticed things other people missed. The apple Ryder thought and almost found it funny. He closed his hand around his father's lighter, squeezed once, and started making decisions. Ryder picked up the burner phone and stared at that message for exactly 4 seconds. Then he typed back 2 words. Not yet. He set the phone face down on the counter. And now we wait, he said. Whoever's on the other end of that is going to get nervous. And nervous people make mistakes. Decker exhaled through his nose. You sure that was smart? No, Ryder said. But it buys us time. Clara refilled her own coffee without being asked and sat down on the stool at the end of the counter. She was the calmest person in the room, which under the circumstances was either impressive or alarming, and depending on how you looked at it. The man in the chair, his name according to the Nevada ID, was Paul Greer, though nobody in the room was entirely confident that was true, had stopped sweating. That was somehow worse. Men stopped sweating when they'd made a decision, and Paul Greer had the look of someone who had just decided something that wasn't going to be good for anyone. You need to let me go, he said. Ryder didn't look at him. Why's that? Because the people who hired me are going to know something went wrong in about 20 minutes, whether you text them back or not. And when that happens, he stopped. When that happens, what, Decker said, they'd have a contingency. The word landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. Everyone felt the ripple. Ryder turned around slowly. What kind of contingency? Paul Greer pressed his lips together. Paul, Ryder said, and his voice had gone very quiet, the kind of quiet that was more dangerous than shouting. I'm going to ask you one more time. What is the contingency? I don't know the specifics, but you know there is one. Yeah, he swallowed. The guy who contacted me, the middleman, he said if the job didn't go clean, there was a backup plan already in motion. He said it like it was supposed to make me feel better. Like even if I got caught, it wouldn't matter because the end result was going to happen anyway. The end result being me dead. The end result being, Paul stopped again. His jaw worked. He was weighing something. Ryder could see it happening. He didn't say just you. The room went absolutely still. Clara set her coffee cup down. Say that again, Ryder said. He said the package was one part of it, that there were other pieces already moving. He used that word pieces like it was a chess game. Paul looked up at Ryder, and for the first time since they dragged him back through the door, he looked genuinely afraid. Not of Ryder, of whoever had sent him. I didn't ask what the other pieces were. I didn't want to know. I do a job, I take the money, I go home. That's all this was supposed to be. But you kept the phone, Ryder said. Yeah, because they told you to confirm completion. Yeah, which means they needed confirmation before they moved the other pieces. Paul said nothing. His silence was its own answer. Ryder stood there for a moment. His hand found the lighter in his jacket pocket without him consciously reaching for it, found it the way a person finds something familiar in the dark by memory and instinct. He ran his thumb over the engraved compass, rose. This wasn't about killing me, he said, and it wasn't directed at anyone in the room. He was talking to himself, working it out in real time. This was about starting something. They poisoned me, I die on the road, it looks like a rival hit. My chapter retaliates. Then whoever set this up sits back and watches two sides burn each other down. He looked at Decker. Somebody's trying to start a war and use me as the match. Decker's expression was not something that had a simple name. Who has that kind of patience? Who plans something like that? Somebody who's been planning it for a while, Clara said from the end of the counter. Everyone looked at her. She didn't seem self-conscious about the attention. The man who came in through the back this morning, the one with the clipboard, he knew exactly where to put it and how much to use and when to use it. That's not improvised. That's practiced. Ryder looked at her. You get a good look at him. Good enough, 50 maybe, heavy through the shoulders. He had a burn scar on his left forearm, which had won old. And he walked like someone who'd been in the military. Very specific way of moving through a space. Efficient. Decker pulled out his own phone. I'll run it. Don't use your own line, Ryder said. Then how? Call Vince. Decker nodded and stepped toward the back of the diner. Ryder pulled a chair up and sat down across from Paul Greer again. Not threatening this time, almost conversational. The middleman who contacted you, how did he reach you? You have a reputation. A reference, I was referred to, Paul said carefully. By who? A guy I worked with 2 years ago, low-level stuff, nothing like this. And this guy, he's the one who vouched for you to the client. I assume so. Where is he now? Paul's expression shifted slightly, just a flicker, but Ryder caught it. He's not anywhere anymore, is he? Ryder said. Paul looked at the floor. They cleaned up their reference chain, Ryder said. Neat, methodical, somebody who's done this before and knows not to leave loose threads. He leaned back. Paul, I'm going to be straightforward with you. Right now, you are the only loose thread left in whatever chain they built. You understand what that means once they figure out this morning didn't go the way they planned. Paul understood. That was clear from the way his face changed. The only reason you are safer sitting in this room than out in that parking lot, Ryder continued, is because I have information they want. As long as they're not sure what happened here, they don't know what you told me, which means they don't know what I know. That window is small and it is closing. So talk to me. Give me something real. Paul lifted his eyes. The money came through a shell account registered in Nevada, but the originating transfer, the guy who moved the first payment, his name came up once in a phone call I wasn't supposed to hear. The middleman called someone and I heard him say a name. He paused. Sorrento. Ryder didn't react outwardly. Inwardly, something cold and specific moved through him. Like recognizing a scar you'd forgotten you had. Say that name again, he said. Sorrento, I don't know the first name, but the middleman said it like he was afraid of it. Like it was a name you said carefully. Ryder stood up and walked to the other end of the counter and stood with both hands flat on the surface. Clara watched him. She knew the look of a man remapping something, recalculating. You know that name, she said quietly. It wasn't a question. I know it, Ryder said. He turned around and looked at her, and for a moment something moved across his face that was complicated enough that she didn't press further. She waited. About 7 months ago, Ryder said, we helped the FBI disrupt a trafficking network operating through 3 states, smuggling routes through the desert. They were moving people, women, kids through supply chain infrastructure, trucks, warehouses, distribution routes. He paused. The guy running the financial side of that operation lost a significant amount of money when the network got shut down. Most of his people went to prison. He didn't. Ryder's jaw tightened. Because they couldn't prove his direct involvement. He was insulated, careful. Sorrento, Clara said. Victor Sorrento. He runs legitimate shipping businesses out of Phoenix. Uses them to move other things. He's been at it for years, and 7 months ago, we cost him the most profitable operation he had ever built. Ryder looked back at Paul. How much were you paid? Paul hesitated. Paul, $50,000, 25 up front, 25 on confirmation. Victor Sorrento's operation was generating close to $4 million a quarter before we shut it down. Ryder said to Decker, who had come back from his phone call and was standing by the kitchen door. $50,000 is pocket change to him. This isn't about the money, this is personal. Decker said, Vince is on it. He's pulling what he can. Give him an hour. We don't have an hour, Clara said. Both men looked at her. I'm serious, she said. You said that contingency moves when they don't hear back. You bought 20 minutes with that text. That was 10 minutes ago. She looked at the clock on the wall, the same one that had hung there since the previous owner, a ticking diner clock with a Coca-Cola logo. You have maybe 10 minutes before someone somewhere starts asking questions you can't answer with a text message. Ryder looked at the burner phone. He picked it up and typed again. Problem with the supply. Need more time. He sent it and put the phone down. 20 seconds later, it buzzed. How long? He typed 2 hours. The reply took longer this time. 45 seconds of silence that felt like a physical wait. Then 1 hour. After that, we proceed with the secondary. Decker read it over Ryder's shoulder. Secondary. The other pieces, Ryder said. What does that mean? Ryder was already thinking. He was running through everything he knew about Sorrento's operation. The pieces they'd dismantled, the pieces they hadn't, the people who'd been connected to it peripherally, who'd never faced charges. He was thinking about what you targeted when you wanted to hurt someone who you couldn't reach directly. What you went after when you wanted to send a message that couldn't be ignored. Where does your granddaughter go to school? He asked Clara. Clara's face changed. Why? She said, and her voice was very careful. Just tell me. She goes to Ridgeline High. She's a junior. Clara's hands had gone still on the counter. Why are you asking me about Maya? Because if I were building a secondary pressure point against someone, and I knew that someone had just survived the first attempt, and I knew that someone had a connection to a particular diner and a particular woman. He stopped. He was watching Clara's face, and what he saw there made him stop differently than he'd planned to. Does Maya know to go straight to school today? No stops, no detours. She left the house at 7:15. Clara picked up the phone behind the counter and dialed before Ryder finished his sentence. It rang 4 times. 5. Went to voicemail. Clara's expression was the face of a woman who had survived a great deal of life and had learned to read the difference between inconvenience and danger. What was on her face right now was not the expression of a woman reading inconvenience. She doesn't always pick up, she said. Her voice was even. Her hands were not. Try again, Ryder said. She tried again. This time it went straight to voicemail like a phone that had been powered off or gone out of range. Decker said, could be the school zone, some of the dead spots out on Route 9. She drives a different route, Clara said quietly. She comes through Mosquite Road because the school zone on Route 9 has construction and the timing's wrong for first bell. She looked at Ryder. Mosquite Road has no dead spots. Ryder was already moving. He said to Decker, you stay with him. He meant Paul Greer. Nobody and nobody out. Call Vince, tell him we need eyes on a 17-year-old girl, dark blue Honda. I need her location now. What are you going to do? I'm going to drive Mosquite Road, Ryder said. Clara was already untying her apron. You are not coming, Ryder said. She is my granddaughter, which is exactly why you're staying here. She won't recognize your face, Mr. Kane. She will recognize mine. Clara dropped the apron on the counter. And if she's frightened, she needs to see someone she knows, not someone she doesn't. Ryder looked at her for a moment. He wanted to argue. The argument died somewhere between his mind and his mouth because she was right, and he knew it, and she knew he knew it. Stay behind me, he said. Do what I say when I say it. No independent decisions. Understood, Clara said, and had her coat off the hook by the door before the sentence was finished. Britt. Ryder turned to the teenage waitress who had not moved from her position against the wall in the last 40 minutes. She startled like she'd been poked. You are going to lock this door behind us. You are not going to open it for anyone. Decker is going to be here. You're going to be fine. Britt nodded rapidly several times like a person who was absolutely not fine, but was committed to performing fine as convincingly as possible. Ryder glanced back at Paul Greer one more time. Paul was sitting very still in his chair, looking at the floor, and Ryder had the feeling of a man who was looking at someone trying very hard not to be a loose thread and failing. Paul, he said. Paul looked up. If you're thinking about making a move while I'm gone, think about what's waiting for you on the other side of that door. Not my guys. Whoever Sorrento sends when that hour is up. He paused. Stay put. Your odds are better in here. He pushed through this door into the early morning. Clara followed him. The desert air hit hard after the closeness of the diner dry and pale, and already carrying the heat it would accumulate through the day. Ryder went to his bike and kicked it over. Clara stood behind him and didn't say anything about the fact that she was about to get on the back of a Hells Angels president's motorcycle at 8 in the morning at the age of 80. She got on. Ryder pulled onto the road and opened it up. Mosquite Road ran about 4 miles north of the diner before it curved back toward the highway junction where Ridgeline High sat. At this hour, there'd be maybe a handful of cars, a few early commuters, the occasional delivery truck. You could drive it in 8 minutes if you knew the road. They made it in 5. And that was where they saw the dark blue Honda pulled off on the gravel shoulder and a white panel van parked behind it with its hazard lights off, and a man standing between the two vehicles and Maya Bennett, 17 years old, dark-haired, wearing the same purple backpack Clara had given her for Christmas, standing with her back against her car door with her arms crossed and an expression on her face that was working very hard to look like it wasn't scared. She was scared. Ryder pulled over 20 yards back and killed the engine. Clara's hand tightened on his shoulder. "How many?" she said quietly. "I see one," Ryder said. "There are at least 2 more in the van." "How do you know?" "Because there are always at least 2 more in the van," he said. "Stay on the bike." I said, "I know what you said. If they see her grandmother running toward her, they'll move faster. Give me 30 seconds. He looked over his shoulder at her. 30 seconds. Clara held his gaze, gave a short, tight nod. Ryder got off the bike and walked toward the scene with his hands visible and his pace unhurried, which was a particular kind of difficult thing to do when every instinct you had was pulling in the opposite direction. The man standing in between the cars was mid-40s, thick across the chest, wearing a jacket too heavy for the morning temperature. He registered Ryder's approach at 15 yards and straightened up. "Private business," he said. "Doesn't look private," Ryder said. "Looks like a young woman having car trouble. We're helping her out." "Yeah," Ryder looked at Maya. "You needing help?" Maya looked at him, this large tattooed stranger on a motorcycle who had just materialized on Mosquite Road and was talking to the man who'd been trying to convince her to get in the van for the last 3 minutes because apparently her car had a brake problem that she hadn't noticed, and he could fix it if she just... "I know him," Clara called from behind Ryder. Maya's eyes went over Ryder's shoulder and found her grandmother on the back of the motorcycle. Something changed in her face entirely. Relief hitting fear and winning. "Grandma, come toward me, honey," Clara said. "Right now." The man in the heavy jacket shifted. It was a small movement, a weight adjustment, and Ryder recognized it the way a person recognizes a familiar sound, even after years of not hearing it. "Don't," Ryder said, "just that word." The man went still. "Whatever you were paid," Ryder said, "it is not enough for this road this morning that with me standing between you and the thing you came here to do. I want you to think about that very carefully before you make the next decision." Behind the heavy jacket man, the van's side door slid open 6 inches. "Make that decision fast," Ryder said, "because your friends are about to make it for you." The door slid the rest of the way open, and 2 men stepped out. And in the next 30 seconds, the quiet Mosquite Road shoulder turned into the specific kind of chaos that happens when 3 people who do this for money run into someone who does it for something else entirely. It was not a long fight, but it was not a gentle one. When it was over, the man in the heavy jacket and both of his associates were sitting on the gravel, with their hands zip-tied behind their backs, with the zip ties Ryder kept in his jacket, because he had learned a long time ago that the moment you needed them and didn't have them was a moment you didn't forget. Maya was standing next to Clara with both arms around her grandmother's waist, her face pressed into her shoulder, not making a sound. Clara was rubbing circles on her back with one hand and looking at Ryder over the top of her granddaughter's head with an expression that was doing at least 4 things simultaneously. Ryder crouched down in front of the man in the heavy jacket. The man had a split lip and was breathing carefully. "Victor Sorrento," Ryder said. "He sent you." The man said nothing. "Was this the secondary," Ryder said, "or is there something else?" "Nothing, and last time I'm going to ask nicely," Ryder said. It was not said aggressively. That was what made it convincing. The man looked at him for a moment. "Then you can't touch Sorrento. You know that, right? You disrupted one pipeline. He has 10 others. What you did 7 months ago was an inconvenience. This us..." He stopped, reconsidered. "This is a message. The message being that nothing you touch is safe." The man held his gaze. "Not your chapter, not your roots, not the old woman's diner." He let that sit for a beat. "And not the girl." Ryder stood up. He took out his phone and made 2 calls. The first was to Decker. The second was to a number that connected him through 2 intermediaries to an FBI contact he had not spoken to since the operation 7 months ago. The conversation was brief and specific, and the FBI contact, to his credit, did not waste time being surprised. When he hung up, Maya had pulled back from Clara and was looking at him with 17-year-old eyes that were trying to process a morning that had started with a calculus quiz and had gone somewhere else entirely. "Are you okay?" Ryder asked her. "I think so," Maya said. Her voice was steadier than it had any right to be. She had her grandmother's eyes, he noticed. That same quality of looking at something dangerous and not looking away. "That man told me my brakes were leaking fluid. I almost got in the van." "Almost," Ryder said. "I kept thinking Gran always says if something feels wrong, it's wrong. Even if someone's being nice. Even if there's a good explanation." She looked at Clara. "You always say that." "I always say that," Clara agreed, "so I didn't get in." "No," Clara said, "you didn't." Maya looked back at Ryder. "You work with my grandmother." "Something like that," he said. Maya nodded slowly in the way of someone filing information away to process at a later time when there was more space for it. Ryder looked at Clara over the girl's head again. The same look as before, but with something added to it now. Something that was shaping into understanding. Sorrento hadn't just targeted him. Sorrento had targeted Clara. This wasn't bait designed to start a war between motorcycle clubs. This was something more calculated, more surgical. It was a message sent to Ryder through the one person in the world who had turned out to matter to him in a way he hadn't known until this morning. The woman who had saved his life, who had known his father, who had kept his father's lighter in a drawer for years waiting for the right moment. Someone had known about that connection. Someone had done their homework, which meant someone had been watching Clara Bennett a great deal longer than this morning. The realization hit him with the particular cold clarity of a thing you should have seen coming and didn't. He looked at Clara. She read his face the way she had learned to read things quickly, accurately, without flinching at what she found. "How long have you known me?" he said. She understood what he was really asking. "You started coming in 2 years and 4 months ago," she said. "The first time you sat in that corner booth, you reminded me so much of your father. I had to go into the back and collect myself before I could take your order. And you never said anything." "I was waiting," she said, "for when it was right." "Someone else wasn't waiting," Ryder said. "Someone else already knew." The wind moved across the desert. Somewhere far down the road, a car was coming. 2 cars, the kind of cars that drove like they were in a hurry and didn't care who noticed. "We need to move," Ryder said. "All of us." He looked at the 3 men zip-tied on the gravel. He looked at Maya's dark blue Honda. He looked at Clara standing in the early Arizona morning with her white hair and her steady eyes, and his father's lighter back in Ryder's jacket pocket. He had walked into a diner for breakfast 2 hours ago. He had walked into something else entirely, and it was not finished, not by a long way. The 2 cars coming down Mosquite Road were unmarked, but not subtle black sedans moving with the particular urgency of people who had authority and wanted you to know it before they stopped. Ryder stood his ground and watched them come. The first one pulled up 20 yards short, and a woman got out before it fully stopped. Late 30s, dark blazer badge clipped to her belt where anyone looking would see it immediately. She took in the scene, 3 men zip-tied on gravel, a motorcycle, an elderly woman, a teenager, and Ryder, with the quick, practiced eyes of someone who had trained herself not to react to things before she understood them. "Special Agent Diana Cruz," she said. "FBI Phoenix Field Office. You called in." "I did," Ryder said. "You're Kane." "I am." She looked at the 3 men on the ground. "You do this?" "They were in the process of taking the girl," Ryder said. "I interrupted the process." Cruz looked at Maya. Maya was still standing close to Clara, still pale under her composure, still holding her backpack straps with both hands like an anchor. Cruz's expression softened briefly, a flicker, professional and controlled before it went back to neutral. "Is she hurt?" "No," Clara said. "She's not." "Ma'am, are you Clara Bennett?" "I am." "Your name came up in the file from 7 months ago," Cruz said, "connected to Kane's chapter in the Sorrento network operation." She paused. "I need to understand what happened this morning. All of it." "I'll tell you all of it," Ryder said. "But not on this road." Cruz held his gaze for a moment, measuring something. Then she nodded. "Follow us." They did not go to a field office. They went to a county sheriff's substation 12 miles south that the FBI occasionally used for sensitive debriefs, the kind of location that didn't appear in press releases. Cruz set up in a back room with a folding table and two other agents Ryder didn't recognize. And for the next 40 minutes, Ryder laid out everything: the diner, the poison Paul Greer, the burner phone, the name Sorrento, the men on Mosquite Road. Cruz listened without interrupting. She had the quality of someone who collected information the way other people collected debts, carefully, without letting you know exactly how much she had. When Ryder finished, she was quiet for a moment. Paul Greer, she said, that name is real. He's done contract work before low level. The fact that Sorrento used him suggests he needed distance, someone with no direct connection to his organization. Sorrento's being careful, Ryder said. Sorrento is always careful, Cruz said, and something in her voice had an edge to it. An old edge. The kind that came from a long time spent trying to get a hand around something that kept slipping through. We've been building a case against him for 11 months, since before your chapter helped us shut down the pipeline. She put both hands flat on the table. What happened this morning accelerates our timeline significantly, but it also complicates it. How? Because what he did this morning, the attempted poisoning, the grab on the girl, if we move on him right now, we get him on conspiracy and attempted murder, but we lose the larger case. We lose 23 other people connected to operations still running. Ryder looked at her steadily. You want to wait. I want to be strategic. With Clara's life. With everyone's life, Cruz said, and her voice was flat and honest enough that Ryder didn't push it further, but he held it in mind. He cataloged it. Because there was a difference between strategy and bureaucracy, and he had spent enough time around both to know the difference on sight. Cruz leaned forward. Here's what I can tell you. We're putting protection on Ms. Bennett and the girl. Overt coverage, 2 agents at the diner, 2 at the girls' school. Sorrento will know we're involved the moment he sees the coverage, which means he'll pull back and regroup. Which buys time, Ryder said. Which buys time, Cruz agreed. And Sorrento, we'll pick him up for questioning. We can't hold him without charges, but we can rattle the cage and see what falls out. Ryder said nothing. Cruz looked at him carefully. I need you to let us handle this cane. I need your chapter to stand down. Because if you move on Sorrento directly, you hand him a narrative, you become the threat, he becomes the victim, and everything we've built for 11 months collapses. Ryder looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, understood. He did not say agreed. Cruz was smart enough to notice the difference. She held his gaze for another beat but didn't press it. She moved on to logistics protection details, contact protocols, what Ryder should do if he received further communication through the burner phone. Maya was driven to her aunt's house on the north side of town. Clara watched the car take her granddaughter away from the substation parking lot, and she stood very still until it turned the corner and disappeared. She's going to be okay, Ryder said. I know, Clara said. She sounded like she knew it. She sounded like she was working to keep knowing it. She's tougher than she looks. She gets that from her mother. She paused. Her mother was my daughter. She died 4 years ago. It's just been the 2 of us since then. Ryder didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say to that. He just stood next to her in the parking lot until she was ready to move. I wanted to go back to the diner, Clara said. FBI is putting agents there. Good. I still want to go back. She looked up at him. It's my diner. I'm not going to let Victor Sorrento make me afraid to walk into my own kitchen. They went back. Decker and the others were still there. Paul Greer had been collected by a second FBI team and was somewhere in federal custody, which was, as Ryder had told him, considerably safer than the alternative. Britt had apparently made a pot of coffee for everyone and was now sitting in a corner booth with her phone texting someone, having achieved a state of calm that was either genuine resilience or total dissociation from reality. Ryder wasn't sure which and didn't have time to find out. He sat with Decker at the counter while Clara went into the kitchen and started cleaning with the particular ferocity of a woman who processed fear by working. Vince came back, Decker said quietly. He had his voice low. Not that it mattered, the 2 FBI agents posted by the door were 30 feet away and clearly not interested in what 2 bikers were saying to each other over coffee. The burn scar on the man Clara described one of Sorrento's known associates. Name's Garrett Houle, ex-military, spent 3 years working security for a shipping company Sorrento owns out of Flagstaff. He was the one who came through the back this morning, Ryder said. Has to be. He's the kind of guy you send in to do the technical work before the other guys show up. Decker paused. There's something else. Ryder looked at him. Vince pulled the ownership record on that white van from Mosquite Road, registered to a shell company. But the shell company's registered agent, the name on the paperwork is a guy named Lawrence Fitch. Decker said the name carefully, watching Ryder's face. You recognize that name? Ryder thought for a moment. Then Fitch, county sheriff's office. He was involved in the periphery of the original operation. He was one of the local contacts the trafficking network used to get advance warning of roadblocks. He never got charged, Decker said. He cooperated, gave the FBI enough to avoid prosecution. Ryder went still. He's still on the job. Still on the job, Decker confirmed. Still has access to law enforcement communications, which means Sorrento knows what Cruz told us in that room, Ryder said. Or he will soon. Decker let that sit there between them. She told you they were going to pick Sorrento up for questioning, Decker said. She did. If Fitch gets that to Sorrento before they reach him. Sorrento moves first, Ryder said. He doesn't sit there and wait to be questioned. He makes a move that changes the equation. What kind of move? Ryder looked toward the kitchen where Clara was running water, and the sound of dishes moving was steady and purposeful and completely ordinary. He thought about the word that man zip-tied on the gravel had used. Message. Sorrento wasn't trying to win a military engagement. He was trying to send a message that could not be ignored or reframed or walk back. He takes something, Ryder said, something that forces me to respond on his terms instead of mine. He pulled out his phone and called Cruz. The call went to voicemail. He called the main field office number Cruz had given him. The agent who answered told him Cruz was currently unavailable and asked if he'd like to leave a message. Tell her Lawrence Fitch, Ryder said. She needs to hear that name before she moves on Sorrento. Tell her it's urgent. He hung up. Decker was already reading his face. You think we're out of time? I think the window between Fitch learning what Cruz plans and Sorrento learning it is very short, Ryder said. And I think we used most of it sitting in that room. He went to the kitchen door. Clara, he said. She was at the sink. She turned around. I need you to do something for me, he said. I need you to stay visible. Stay in the front of the diner where the agents can see you. Don't go into the back alone for any reason. Don't step outside for any reason. If anything feels wrong, I tell the agents, she said. I'm not a child, Mr. Kane. I know you're not. That's why I'm telling you instead of just putting you in a call and having someone drive you somewhere safe and ignoring your opinion about it. Clara considered this. It appeared to satisfy her. How long, she said. A few hours, maybe less. Cruz is moving on Sorrento. Once they have him in a room. You don't believe that, Clara said. Sure. Ryder paused. You're telling me what you want to be true, she said, not what you think is actually going to happen. He looked at her for a moment. There were very few people left in his life who could read him that clearly, that fast. It was a short list, and it had gotten shorter over the years, and this woman had been on it without his knowing it for 2 years and 4 months. Stay visible, he said. I mean it. He went back out front. He and Decker stepped outside to where 3 more of his chapter were waiting, and he talked to them in low and specific terms about what he needed and where he needed it and why. His men listened. They didn't ask unnecessary questions. It was one of the things he valued most about the people who had stayed with him over the years. They understood when a situation had moved past the point where questions were useful. By noon, he had 4 men positioned at intervals around the diner perimeter. Obviously not in a way that would read as a militia deployment to the 2 FBI agents by the door. Just present, just watchful. He went inside and ate the lunch Clara put in front of him because it would have been rude not to, and because he had learned a long time ago that you ate when food was available because you never knew when the next time would be. The afternoon passed the way afternoons pass when you are waiting for something bad to happen and trying to prevent it, slowly, loudly inside your own head. At 4:15, Cruz called him back. Fitch, she said. Her voice was stripped of its earlier, careful neutrality. It was just tightly controlled anger. How did you get that name, my own people, Ryder said. Is it accurate? A pause. We're looking at it. Did you get to Sorrento before Fitch could warn him? Another pause longer. We went to Sorrento's office in Phoenix at 2 o'clock, Cruz said. He wasn't there. His staff said he left this morning for a meeting in Tucson. We're trying to locate him now. Ryder felt the day shift, not dramatically, Just a small, decisive pivot, the way a door swings when someone pushes it and you didn't hear them coming. He's not in Tucson, Ryder said. Probably not, Cruz admitted. We have alerts out. We'll find him. How long? I can't give you a timeline, Cruz. He said her name the way you said something when you needed someone to drop the professional distance for 30 seconds and talk to you like a human being. How long? A breath. Could be hours. Could be longer. He has resources and he knows how to use them. And in the meantime, your people stay put. Ms. Bennett stays covered. We do this right. He hung up and went back inside. Clara had the dinner prep going. She was moving through her kitchen the same way she had moved through it for 11 years, with the efficiency and quiet authority of a woman entirely at home in her domain. One of the FBI agents had come inside and was sitting at the counter with a coffee and looking slightly guilty about having accepted it. Ryder sat at his corner table and watched the room and thought. At 7:40 in the evening, the FBI agent who had been sitting at the counter stood up and excused himself to use the restroom and did not come back. Ryder noticed at 7:42. He was at the restroom door in 43 seconds. He opened it without knocking. The room was empty. There was a window above the sink, small, high, the kind a person had to commit to getting through. It was open. He came back out, moving fast. The second agent had been posted outside. Ryder pushed through the front door. The second agent was on the ground beside his car, breathing, pulse strong when Ryder checked. Something in his coffee. Decker was already there, already on his phone, already calling it in. Ryder went back inside. Clara, he said. She was in the kitchen. Or she should have been. The dinner prep was still on the counter, a cutting board with half-chopped vegetables, a pot with the burner still running low flame, a dish towel on the floor. Clara was not in the kitchen. The back door was standing open. Ryder moved through it into the alley behind the diner. One of his men, the one posted at the back, was sitting against the wall with his head down and his hands on his knees, conscious but barely. Back door, the man said thickly. Two of them. Came in fast. She yelled. She fought. He looked up and there was something in his face that was worse than the fact that he'd been knocked down. I'm sorry, Ryder. Ryder stood in the alley for one moment. He went back into the kitchen, looked at the dish towel on the floor, looked at the back door, looked at the cutting board. Then he saw it, propped against the salt shaker on the shelf beside the door. A piece of paper folded once with one word written on the outside in block letters. Kane. He picked it up and unfolded it. The handwriting was precise and controlled the handwriting of someone who wanted you to know they were calm. The old woman for you. Come to the Desert Sun warehouse on Route 16. Midnight. Come alone. If we see anyone else, we hear a radio, we see a phone, she dies before you reach the door. If you contact the FBI, she dies. You have until midnight. Underneath that, a second line added as an afterthought, or possibly very deliberately, she told us she's not afraid of you. We thought you should know she said that. Ryder read the note twice, folded it, put it in his jacket pocket next to his father's lighter. Decker appeared in the kitchen doorway. He'd read the answer in Ryder's face before Ryder had said a word. They have her, Decker said. Yes. What do you want to do? Ryder looked at the pot on the stove. Clara had been making soup. He reached over and turned off the burner. I want to think for 3 minutes, Ryder said. And then I want to talk to you and the others. And then I want to know everything we know about Desert Sun Warehouse on Route 16. Cruz. Sorrento has a contact inside law enforcement. We don't know if it's only Fitch or if it goes further. If I call Cruz right now, that call might be the thing that gets Clara killed before midnight. He looked at Decker steadily. I'm not calling Cruz. Decker held his gaze. Something moved across his face, not disagreement, not exactly. More like the expression of a man who understood the decision that had just been made and was accounting for all of what it meant. Okay, Decker said. I'm not going alone either, Ryder said. That note is written by someone who's seen too many movies. Nobody goes into a warehouse situation alone. But I need people who know how to move without making noise, without making calls, without anything electronic that can be scanned or triangulated. I know exactly who to call, Decker said. Then call them. Ryder checked his watch. We have 4 hours and 11 minutes. He picked up Clara's dish towel from the floor and folded it and set it on the counter. She had fought. 2 men and she had fought them. She was 80 years old and she had fought them. He thought about that as he walked out of the kitchen. He thought about a woman who had noticed a faint metallic smell at 6 in the morning and acted on it without hesitation. He thought about a woman who had kept a lighter in a drawer for years, patient and quiet, waiting for a moment that had no guaranteed arrival date. He thought about what she had said to Sorrento's men. She told us she's not afraid of you. He believed her completely. And it made what he was about to do simpler rather than harder, because there was no version of this night in which he did not go through that warehouse door. Victor Sorrento had made a serious miscalculation. He had taken a woman who had once saved Ryder Kane's life, and he had assumed that meant she was leverage. What she was the reason. The men Decker called were not young. That was the first thing Ryder noticed when they gathered in the back lot of an auto repair shop 2 miles from the diner at 8:30 that evening. 6 men. The youngest was 44. The oldest was 61. Combined, they had accumulated somewhere north of 200 years of doing things that didn't appear in official records. They had scars in places that told stories nobody had asked to hear out loud. They moved with the particular economy of men who had learned at significant personal cost not to waste motion. They were exactly who Ryder needed. He spread a hand-drawn map on the hood of Decker's truck. Vince, their information man, the one who ran their intelligence the way a librarian runs a library quietly and with complete authority, had pulled everything available on Desert Sun Warehouse in the past 3 hours. Satellite images from 2 years ago, county property records, a shipping manifest from a defunct logistics company that had used the space intermittently. One main structure, Ryder said, corrugated steel big enough to move shipping containers through, 2 vehicle access points, front roll doors, and a loading dock on the north side. 3 personnel doors that we know of, front entrance, north side service door, and a fire exit on the east wall. He tapped the map. What we don't know is internal layout beyond the basic footprint, how many people Sorrento has inside, or exactly where they're holding Clara. Could be a straight exchange location, said a man named Ortega, who had spent 12 years doing something overseas that he described only as logistics. They hold her in plain sight. You walk in, they have their shot. It could be, Ryder said. But Sorrento isn't simple. He doesn't do things for one reason when he can do them for 3. He looked around at the men. Vince flagged something in the shipping records. Desert Sun was used by one of Sorrento's legitimate companies as a transfer point 8 months ago, long enough before the pipeline shut down that it wasn't part of what we disrupted. Meaning it was never investigated, Decker said. Meaning it might still be operational, Ryder said, which means tonight might not just be about Clara. The men absorbed that. Ortega said, how many containers could that space hold? Active 6 to 8. Nobody said anything for a moment. They were all doing the same math, and none of them liked what they were adding up. No phones, Ryder said. Nothing with a signal. Sorrento has at least one law enforcement contact. We have to assume he has scanning capability at the site. If a phone transmits within range, they'll know we're coming. He looked at each man in turn. We go dark. We go quiet. We go in through the north loading dock while the front is occupied. Ortega takes the east with 2 men. Decker stays back as extract. I go in for Clara. And if it's a clean setup, just guards in one room, Decker asked. Then we get Clara and we leave, Ryder said. And Cruz gets an anonymous tip about what else is in that building. And if it's not clean, then we adapt, Ryder said. That's what we do. They left vehicles a half-mile out and walked the rest of the way through the desert dark. No flashlights. The kind of night where the stars were doing real work, casting just enough pale light to move by if you knew how to use it. The air was cold now, the way desert nights were cold, sudden and complete, like a switch had been thrown. Ryder had his father's lighter in his jacket pocket. He was aware of it the way you were aware of something warm in a cold place. At 11:20, they reached the perimeter. Vince had estimated 4 to 6 guards based on the number of vehicles he'd been able to identify through the satellite pass. The actual count, as Ortega whispered through hand signals from the east side, was 8, more than Sorrento needed for a simple exchange, which confirmed what Ryder had already started to believe: this wasn't just an exchange location. He signaled Decker. Decker pulled back 2 men toward the front. The plan was simple because simple was what worked. Decker's 2 men created a distraction at the front vehicle access. Nothing dramatic, just a car left running on the road outside, headlights, on horn tapped twice, the kind of thing that pulled attention outward long enough for everything else to happen. It pulled 4 of the 8 guards toward the front. That left 4 inside. The loading dock lock took Ortega 40 seconds. Ryder had stopped being impressed by that particular skill set years ago, but he noted it. The door opened without sound. They moved in. The interior of the warehouse was large and dark and smelled of diesel and something else underneath it, something that Ryder identified after 2 steps and which tightened his jaw and made his next 3 steps faster. The something else was people. The specific accumulated smell of people kept in a confined space for a long time. It was not a smell you forgot once you'd encountered it in this context. He touched Ortega's arm. Ortega nodded. He already knew. Ryder kept moving toward the interior. One of the 4 inside guards was near the loading dock, back turned, watching the commotion at the front door with the distracted interest of someone who'd decided it wasn't his problem. He went down quietly and quickly and without drama. That left 3. The next one was near the center of the space, and dealing with him took 12 seconds and made a sound that was more than Ryder wanted, but less than he'd feared. The third was near a partition wall toward the back, and Ortega's man handled him before Ryder even reached that section. 1 guard left, the one closest to wherever Clara was. Ryder found him because Clara found him first. From somewhere behind the partition wall, he heard a sharp crack, the sound of something hard connecting with something that hadn't expected it, and then a man's voice saying something colorful and pained, and then Clara's voice very clearly. "Sit down before you embarrass yourself further." Ryder came around the partition. Clara was sitting in a folding chair, her wrists zip-tied to the armrests, her ankles tied to the chair legs. She had a cut on her cheekbone, dried blood on her chin, and her white hair had come entirely loose from its pins. She looked like someone who had been through something. She also looked like someone who had just hit a guard across the shin with her own chair by throwing her weight sideways hard enough to topple herself partway and swing the leg of it into his leg, which was why the guard was now hopping and swearing and turning around to deal with Ryder instead. He didn't deal with Ryder well. When it was done, Ryder crouched in front of Clara and took out his knife and cut the zip ties on her wrists first, then her ankles. Clara rubbed her wrists. She did not appear to be in shock. She appeared to be angry, which Ryder recognized as a significantly better condition. "Your cheek," he said. "I know about my cheek," she said. "It happened in the car. I made a point about their driving." She flexed her hands, testing circulation. "How many?" "We're down to 1 problem," Ryder said. "Sorrento. He's here. He's here somewhere. This was never just a holding location." He looked at her directly. "There are containers in this building, Clara. We can hear them." She understood immediately. He watched her understand. It watched what crossed her face, not surprise, but something that looked like the arrival of a grief she'd been half expecting. "How many containers?" she said. "We don't know yet." She stood up from the chair without his help, which he'd expected, though he kept his hand near her elbow in case. She was steady, a little slow but steady. "We find Sorrento," she said, "and we open those containers." "In that order," Ryder said. "In whatever order gets it done." He almost smiled, didn't quite. They moved together toward the far end of the building, Ortega and 1 other man flanking. The containers were stacked in a section, walled off by a secondary partition, a deliberate internal division, the kind of setup that told you someone had modified this building specifically for this purpose. The locks on the containers were heavy and new, which was its own statement. And then from behind a door set into the partition wall, someone began to clap. Slow, deliberate. The kind of applause that wasn't applause. The door opened. Victor Sorrento was shorter than his reputation. That was the first thing you noticed. He was maybe 5'10", well-dressed, in the specific way of men who wanted you to know the clothes were expensive, silver-haired, with the face of someone who had made a great many decisions about other people's lives and found the process agreeable. He had 2 men behind him, and he had a gun in his right hand held with the casual ease of someone who had held guns before and didn't find them remarkable. "Kane," he said, "you came." "I came," Ryder said. "Alone, I specified." "You specified a lot of things," Ryder said. "Some of them happened." Sorrento's eyes moved to Clara. Something in his expression shifted, not guilt. Nothing as human as guilt. More like a chess player reassessing a board position. "You got her loose faster than I expected." "She got herself partially loose," Ryder said. "I just finished the job." "She's a remarkable woman," Sorrento said with genuine-sounding appreciation that was somehow worse than contempt. I've been watching her for 8 months, since we identified her connection to your father. He looked at Clara. Did he tell you about that we knew about the lighter before today? That we knew about the marriage? Clara looked at him steadily. You used that information to build leverage. I used it to understand motivation, Sorrento said. There's a difference. He moved a few steps to his left, which repositioned his men and changed the geometry of the room in ways that Ryder was tracking in real time. What I needed to understand was what would make Ryder Kane personally involved. Not professionally, not as a chapter president. Personally, he gestured with the gun, a casual sweep. You're that thing, Mrs. Bennett, the person who knew his father, who kept the one object that connected them, who saved his life this morning with 40 years of knowledge she had no business having. He paused. I needed him angry. I needed him here without the FBI, without backup, without the protective layer of an ongoing federal operation that keeps both of us in certain lanes. He looked at Ryder. I needed just you. Why, Ryder said. Because in 8 months of federal investigation, they cannot touch me directly. Every case they build has a layer between me and the action. That's by design. It has always been by design. Sorrento's voice was very composed. But you and your chapter disrupted the most profitable thing I've ever built. You did it personally, and now you're standing in my building without a badge, without authorization, having assaulted 8 of my employees, none of whom will file a report, of course, but that's beside the point. He raised the gun and pointed it at Clara. In about 4 minutes, 2 things happen. My remaining men arrive and you become the story. The biker who broke into a private warehouse. The biker whose chapter has a documented history of criminal activity. And the old woman who helped him. He tilted his head slightly. The federal case against me dies because the primary witnesses have credibility problems. And I rebuild in 18 months. Ryder had been listening carefully. Not to the words. To the pace of the words, the pauses, the rhythm of someone who was performing confidence and keeping track of whether the performance was working. Sorrento was keeping track, which meant he was not as certain as he sounded. The containers, Ryder said. Something flickered in Sorrento's face. Open them, Ryder said. Let's talk about what's in them. The contents of private shipping containers on private property are why you needed me here without the FBI, Ryder said. Not because of the legal angle. Because if the FBI had come tonight, they'd have had cause to open everything in this building. But if it's just me, just a biker and an old woman, then whatever's in those containers stays dark until you can move it. He paused. How long have they been in there, Victor? The first name landed like a slap. Sorrento's jaw tightened. Open them, Clara said. Her voice came from slightly behind and to Ryder's left, and it was very quiet and very clear. Open those containers right now. Mrs. Bennett, Sorrento said, you're in no position. I am in every position, Clara said. I am 80 years old and I have spent this entire day being poisoned, threatened, zip-tied to a chair and driven to a warehouse by men who hit, like they learned it from a YouTube video. She took one step forward. I am done being patient. Open those containers. Sorrento swung the gun toward her. It was the move Ryder had been waiting for, not consciously, but in the part of his body that was always watching for the exact moment when a situation pivoted, when someone shifted from position to action, and the geometry of the room changed for the last time. Clara moved first. She threw her weight sideways hard and deliberate the way she had thrown the chair leg into the guard's shin earlier, with the specific physics of a small woman who understood that momentum was a tool and she was going to use every tool available. She didn't fall. She lurched, stumbled, caught herself on the partition wall, but she had moved enough, shifted out of the direct line enough that Sorrento's gun tracked away from where she'd been. Ryder fired. The sound in the enclosed space was enormous. Sorrento went down and did not get up. His 2 men started to move and stopped when Ortega and his man came through the door behind them with a speed and decisiveness that settled the question immediately. The room was silent. Ryder crossed to Clara in 4 steps. Are you? I'm fine, she said. She was pressed against the partition wall, breathing hard. Did you get him? I got him. She closed her eyes for exactly 2 seconds, then opened them. The containers. Clara. The containers, Ryder. He turned to Ortega. Tools. It took 6 minutes to get the locks off. 6 minutes that felt longer than the hours before them. During those 6 minutes, Ryder became certain of what he was going to find. The smell had intensified, and he could hear something now, or thought he could, the specific silence of people who had learned that silence was the safest response to sound. The first container opened. What was inside it took a moment to process. Not because it was unexpected he had braced for this, but because bracing and arriving were different things, and the distance between what you prepared for and what you actually stood in front of was always wider than you thought. There were girls inside, young, some very young. They flinched at the light and pressed back against each other, and then when they understood the cure was open and no one was holding them back, some of them started to cry, and some of them went completely silent, and some of them reached toward the open door like they weren't sure they were allowed. Clara was already there, past Ryder, past Ortega, past all of them, because she was 80 years old and she had been in this building for 3 hours, and she had nothing left to waste on hesitation. She stepped into the container and crouched down slowly because her knees were not what they had been, and she had been tied to a chair, and none of that stopped her for a moment. And she put her hands out and said in a voice entirely unlike any she'd used in the last 12 hours, "You're okay, I've got you. You're okay now." They opened the second container, and the third, 21 girls. The youngest looked about 13, the oldest maybe 19. Some of them were in conditions that would require immediate medical attention. All of them were alive. Ryder stood outside the container and made 2 calls. The first was to Decker. The second was to Cruz, and this time she picked up on the first ring. "Desert Sun Warehouse on Route 16, he said. "You need every unit you have, medical included. And Cruz, bring people you trust. People without a connection to Fitch." A pause. "How many's 21? He heard her breathe. "And Sorrento," she said. "He's here," Ryder said. "He's going to need a doctor too." Alive. He heard Cruz already moving, already talking to someone in the room with her. The particular controlled urgency of a person whose 11-month case had just delivered itself through a side door in the middle of the night. "Kane," she said before she hung up, "you need to stay there. This is going to be complicated." "I know," he said. "Legally complicated, for you." "I know that too." "Okay," she said, "then good work." She said it quickly like she might need to take it back and hung up. Ryder put the phone away. Decker appeared from the direction of the loading dock. He looked at the open containers. He looked at what was inside them. Something moved across his face that had no name in particular, but was recognizable as the expression of a man confronting the clearest possible reason for everything they'd done that day. "We need to call ambulances," he said. "Cruz is doing it," Ryder said. "How long?" 20 minutes, maybe 15. Decker nodded. He walked to the nearest container and sat down on the ground beside the door and started talking to the girls closest to the opening. Nothing remarkable, just quiet words, calm voice. The kind of talking that said you were present and you were not going anywhere, and the door was going to stay open. He had grandchildren, 2 of them. Nobody in the chapter knew what to do with that information because it didn't fit the picture, and Decker had never tried to reconcile it. He just was who he was in both directions. Ryder went back to where Clara was. She had moved into the third container and was sitting on the floor with her back against the wall, and there were 2 girls leaning against her, one on each side in the way that people lean against things that feel safe. Clara had her arms around both of them, and she was talking quietly, and her cheek was still bleeding a little, and her hair was completely down, and she was the most composed person in the building. She looked up when Ryder came in. He crouched down. "Help is coming," he said. "I know," she said. 20 minutes. "Okay." He stayed crouched there for a moment. The girl on Clara's left had fallen half asleep, which was either trust or exhaustion or both. The one on her right was watching Ryder with dark, careful eyes that had seen too many reasons not to trust quickly. "You're safe," he said to her, not loudly, not in a way that demanded response, just putting it in the room. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she looked back at Clara, and something in her shoulders changed. Not much, just slightly less compressed. Clara met Ryder's eyes over the girl's head. "Your father," she said quietly, "he would have walked in here the same way you did." Ryder said he might have been smarter about it. "He might have," Clara agreed. "He also would have done it anyway." Outside, somewhere in the distance, the first siren started. The sound moved through the desert like water through dry ground, carrying spreading arriving long before the lights did. Ryder stayed where he was. He'd come out when he needed to. Right now, this room needed what it had in it, and removing himself from it would change the equilibrium of something fragile. He reached into his jacket pocket and closed his hand around the lighter. The compass rose under his thumb. The three initials on the back, JDK. He thought about the man who had carried this thing through years Ryder hadn't been present for, who had sat across a breakfast table from Clara Bennett and eaten his eggs and talked about a son he didn't know how to reach in a voice she had described as never stopping. Not once, not in all that time. He thought about what it meant to be known by someone who owed you nothing, who had simply been paying attention. The sirens got louder. 21 girls alive in a warehouse in the Arizona desert. Clara's hands steady on the shoulders of two strangers who needed steadying. The lighter warm from being carried close all day. Ryder Kane sat on the floor of a shipping container and listened to help arriving, and for the first time since 6:07 that morning, he let himself breathe all the way out. The first responders arrived at 11:52 p.m., 8 minutes before the deadline on Sorrento's note, which Ryder thought was fitting in a way he didn't bother to articulate. Crews came in with the second wave. 4 FBI vehicles, 2 county ambulances, and a state police unit that materialized from somewhere and added to the general controlled chaos of a warehouse parking lot that had gone from empty desert silence to a major federal crime scene in under 20 minutes. She walked in with the expression of someone who had been running on adrenaline and coffee for 11 months and had just watched 11 months of work either pay off completely or collapse depending on the next hour of decisions. She found Ryder outside the third container. She looked at him. She looked at the open containers. She looked at the medical personnel moving carefully inside them, with flashlights and soft voices and blankets. She said, 21. 21, Ryder said. Cruz pressed her lips together, looked at the ground for exactly 2 seconds, looked back up. Sorrento, she said. Inside, East Partition. He's been treated for a gunshot wound to the shoulder by one of my people who has field medical training. Ryder paused. He's stable, and he is extremely unhappy. I'll bet, Cruz said, and you shot him. He had a gun pointed at an 80-year-old woman. I understand that. She held his gaze. I need a full statement, Kane's voice, tonight. Everything from the moment you found the note. I know. This is going to be legally complicated for you and your men. You said that on the phone, Ryder said. I told you I knew it then, too. Cruz looked at him for a moment, the look of someone doing a rapid recalculation. The girls changed the landscape significantly. What you found in those containers, the trafficking operation, the connection to Sorrento's legitimate shipping infrastructure, that's the case I've been trying to build for 11 months, and you just handed it to me with a bow on it. She paused. That doesn't make what happened here tonight legal. No, Ryder agreed. It doesn't. But context is context, Cruz said carefully. And I am not going to stand in a parking lot at midnight in front of 21 recovered victims and spend my energy building a case against the people who found them. That's your call to make, Ryder said. It is. She started to turn away, then stopped. Fitch, you said Fitch was the leak. Fitch, Ryder confirmed. Cruz reached for her radio. What happened next took 4 minutes. It was not dramatic the way people imagine federal arrests were dramatic. A call went out, 2 agents moved to a specific vehicle in the parking lot, and Lawrence Fitch, who had arrived on scene as part of the county response and had been standing near the perimeter trying to look like a man who was simply doing his job, was placed in handcuffs with very little ceremony and a great deal of finality. He did not resist. He looked as Ryder watched from 30 yards away, like a man who had known this moment was possible and had spent a long time hoping it wouldn't come and had just run out of hope. One of the agents brought him past Ryder on the way to the car. Fitch looked at Ryder. Something crossed his face that might have been accusation or might have been recognition of the obvious, that this was the natural consequence of choices made over a long period of time, and there was nobody else to blame for where they led. He didn't say anything. Ryder didn't either. There was nothing worth saying. Inside the warehouse, one of the medical responders came to find Cruz with an urgent expression and a name. A girl's 16 dark hair had been in the second container. She had given her name and her hometown and one additional piece of information that the responder relayed to Cruz in a low-clipped voice. Cruz listened. Her face did something complicated. She turned to Ryder. The girl in the second container, her name is Adriana Velez. She went missing 6 months ago from a town 40 miles from here. Her mother filed a report. The report was taken by county sheriff's office and classified as a voluntary runaway with insufficient evidence for investigation. She paused. The officer who took that report and made that classification was Lawrence Fitch. The weight of that settled on everyone standing close enough to hear it. 6 months. Adriana Velez had been in Sorrento's network for 6 months while a man on Sorrento's payroll made sure nobody came looking. That's not the case you had, Ryder said quietly. No, Cruz said. That's a better one. She went to find Adriana Velez. Ryder found Clara sitting on the back bumper of one of the ambulances with a paramedic attending to her cheek and an aluminum emergency blanket around her shoulders that she was tolerating with visible reluctance, the way a person tolerates something they know is necessary but find mildly undignified. How is it? Ryder said, nodding at her cheek. Cosmetic, Clara said firmly. 2 stitches possibly. I've had worse from my own oven. She held still while the paramedic worked. The girls, all receiving care, 21 confirmed. One of them, Adriana, her mother, has been looking for her for 6 months. Clara closed her eyes. 6 months, she said. Yeah. She opened her eyes. Something in them had shifted, not broken, nothing that simple. More like rearranged. Like a woman who had lived long enough to know that the world's capacity for cruelty was not surprising, and who had also lived long enough to know that this was not the thing you dwelled on. Not now, not yet. Someone's going to call her mother tonight, Clara said. Cruz will handle it. Good, Clara looked at him. You have to give a statement. I know. They're going to ask you a lot of things that put you in a complicated position. I know that too. You should probably have a lawyer. Clara, he said with mild patience. I have handled complicated situations before. She gave him a look. Not like this one. No, he agreed, not exactly like this one. The statement took 2 hours conducted in the back of a federal vehicle with Cruz and another agent whose name Ryder didn't catch. He told the truth in the specific way that people who are telling the truth also shape their truth, not dishonestly, but architecturally. He told them what happened. He described what he found. He accounted for every action and every person and every decision made from the moment he read the note until the moment Cruz arrived. What the statement did not resolve that night, it deferred to subsequent conversations. There were subsequent conversations, several of them. Over the following 3 weeks, Ryder spoke to federal prosecutors twice, and to a defense attorney Clara found for him, a woman named Hargrove, who was 67 years old and had the specific energy of someone who had been underestimated continuously since law school and had used every instance of it as fuel. Hargrove was excellent. The charges that were discussed in preliminary conversations with the prosecutor's office were significantly reduced in the conversations that followed for the reasons Cruz had implied in the parking lot context, and 21 girls in a trafficking network that Ryder's actions had effectively shut down in a single night. The final agreement was one that Hargrove described as acceptable and Ryder described as fair, and the two descriptions were not identical, but they pointed in the same direction. Victor Sorrento was charged with 28 counts, trafficking, conspiracy, obstruction, bribery of a law enforcement officer, in a list that continued past what Ryder tracked carefully. His lawyers were expensive and creative, and it didn't help him. Adriana Velez testified. 3 other girls testified. And the documentation that Cruz's team pulled from the Desert Sun warehouse over the following 72 hours was described by the lead prosecutor as some of the most comprehensive evidence of a trafficking operation they had encountered in a decade of these cases. Lawrence Fitch pleaded guilty and received a sentence that Ryder considered inadequate and accepted as the realistic outcome of a system that moved at its own pace, regardless of how anyone felt about it. Clara reopened the diner 6 weeks after the night at the warehouse. She repainted the outside. Not a dramatic change, the same color, but fresh, the way a thing looks when you've decided it deserves care rather than just maintenance. She had a new lock installed on the back door, which was practical. She had a small sign made for the window, which was something else. The sign said, "All are welcome." Nobody turned away. Ryder was there the morning she reopened. So were Decker and Ortega and the others. So were several people from town who had heard pieces of what had happened and wanted to be present without fully understanding what they were being present for, which was fine. Presence didn't require complete comprehension. The diner filled up faster than it ever had on a regular Tuesday morning. Britt came back to work, which Ryder had not expected, but Clara seemed to have. She arrived in her uniform 15 minutes before opening and tied her apron and started the coffee without being asked. And when Ryder asked her if she was sure she wanted to come back after everything, she looked at him with the specific expression of a 22-year-old who has recently learned something important about the world and feels clarified rather than diminished by it. "Where else would I be?" she said. He didn't have an answer for that. Over the weeks that followed, the diner became something that didn't have a clean category. It was still a diner, still served the best breakfast in 3 counties, still had Clara's soup on the lunch menu, still had the Coca-Cola clock on the wall, and the corner booth that Ryder occupied every Tuesday and Thursday morning. But it was also gradually and practically something more. A woman came in one afternoon with 2 teenagers who looked like they hadn't slept indoors recently. Clara fed them, found out what they needed, made 2 phone calls, and within 3 hours had connected them with a shelter 60 miles north that had space. She did it efficiently and without announcement and went back to the kitchen. A veteran came in who was having a stretch of days that were hard in ways that didn't require detailed explanation from people who recognized the particular quality of that kind of hard. He sat in Ryder's corner booth for 4 hours, and Clara brought him coffee and food and did not once suggest he should move along. Word traveled the way word travels in small communities, sideways through implication and example rather than declaration. People started coming to Clara's diner not only for breakfast, but for the specific quality of being in a room where someone was paying attention. Ryder's chapter became, without any formal arrangement, the implicit safety infrastructure of that attention. Not visible in any way that drew the wrong kind of notice. Just present, just watchful. The way certain things work best when they don't need to advertise themselves. Maya came to say goodbye on a Saturday in late October. She was leaving for college on Monday, a school in Flagstaff nursing program, which had surprised exactly nobody who had watched her that morning on Mosquite Road assess a dangerous situation with her grandmother's eyes and her grandmother's refusal to look away from what was true. She found Ryder at his corner table. "I wanted to talk to you before I left," she said. He gestured to the seat across from him. She sat. She put her hands on the table and looked at them for a moment, the way people looked at things when they were gathering what they wanted to say. "That morning," she said, "on the road, I almost got in the van." "Almost," he said. "I keep thinking about how close almost is." She looked up. "One more minute of him talking, and I think I would have." She paused. "Gran always said trust the feeling, but feelings are fast, and the situation was the guy was calm and normal and had a whole explanation for everything." "That's how they work," Ryder said. "They're very good at calm and normal." "I know that now." She met his eyes. "Thank you for coming down that road." "Your grandmother saved my life at 6 in the morning, Ryder said. "Coming down a road was the easy part." Maya was quiet for a moment. "She told me about your father, about the lighter." She hesitated. Are you okay with that?" Her telling me, "I'm okay with it," Ryder said. "She loved him," Maya said. In her way, the way she loves things that she can't fix but can take care of. She looked toward the kitchen, where Clara was moving with a particular efficiency that was so familiar it had become part of the room's ambient sound. "She takes care of things. That's what she does." "I know," Ryder said. "I'm glad you're one of the things she takes care of," Maya said. "Even if you don't always look like you need it." Ryder looked at this 17-year-old girl with her grandmother's eyes, who was about to go into a world that had revealed itself on a single Tuesday morning to be capable of both the worst and the best of what people did to each other. "Take care of yourself up in Flagstaff," he said. "I will." She stood. Then quickly, before she could decide against it, she leaned down and hugged him. It was brief and genuine, and slightly awkward in the specific way of people who are not yet sure if the gesture matches the relationship. And then she was walking back to the counter to say something to Clara that made Clara reach out and cup her face with both hands in the way of women who have raised someone and know they are watching the raising end and the person beginning. Ryder looked away and gave them the moment. 3 weeks later, on a Wednesday morning, when the light was still thin and the desert was doing its best impression of something close to cool, Ryder drove out to a small cemetery on the northeast side of Red Mesa. It had been 6 years since his last visit. He knew the way without looking it up, which told him something about what he'd been carrying that he hadn't fully acknowledged. Joseph Douglas Kane. The dates. The simple stone, no military designation, because his father had asked for none, which Ryder had always thought was humility, and now suspected might have been something more complicated. He stood there for a while without saying anything, because some conversations started better in silence. Then he said, "She's something, you're Clara. I don't know if you knew that when you were with her. I think you probably did." The desert did not respond. That was fine. "She kept your lighter 11 years, he said, in a drawer, waiting for the right moment. He reached into his jacket and took it out. The compass rose. The 3 initials. He turned it over in his hand once. "I don't know if I was worth waiting for, but she seemed to think the moment was right, so I'm going to trust her read on that. She has a good read on things." He crouched down, placed the lighter on the ground at the base of the stone, looked at it there, left it for a moment, then picked it back up because the old man had left it to Clara, and Clara had left it to him, and he was not going to leave it in the ground. He was going to carry it. He stood up. "I'm sorry I stopped coming," he said. "I thought it was too late to matter. I think I was wrong about that." He paused. "I seem to have been wrong about several things. Clara's working on the list." He stayed another few minutes, then drove back to the diner. It was just past 7 when he walked in. The morning crowd had thinned. The Coca-Cola clock ticked. The corner booth was empty, which was unusual enough that he noticed it before he sat down. He sat. Clara came out of the kitchen. She had her apron on and her hair pinned back, and the 2 stitches on her cheek had healed to a thin, pale line that she had neither concealed nor complained about. She poured him his coffee, black, no sugar, same as every Tuesday and Thursday morning, for 2 years and 4 months. She set it down. He looked up at her. "I went to see him this morning," he said. Something moved in her face, warm and quiet and entirely contained the way she contained most things. "I know," she said. "You had that look when you came in." "What look?" "The look of someone who's put something down that they've been carrying for a long time." She studied him for a moment, and what she saw in his face appeared to satisfy some long-held question. "How did it feel?" "Like something that should have happened a long time ago," Ryder said, "and also like it happened at exactly the right time." Clara nodded as if this was exactly what she'd expected him to say. She went back into the kitchen. He heard the sounds of his breakfast being made, the specific sounds of that kitchen that had become, without him, having chosen it, one of the sounds he associated with the feeling of being in a place where someone knew you. He picked up his coffee and drank it and looked out the window at the desert morning that was turning slowly from pale to gold, the way desert mornings did when they decided to mean it. Clara came back out with his plate. Steak, eggs, black coffee, rye toast. She set it in front of him. She looked at him. He looked at her. She said, "You can eat now." And Ryder Kane, president of the Hells Angels Red Mesa chapter, son of Joseph Douglas Kane man, who had walked into a warehouse at midnight for a woman he had known for 2 years and 4 months, and somehow longer than that picked up his fork and ate his breakfast in the quiet golden morning, while the diner filled around him with the sounds of people who had found their way to a place where the door was always open and nobody was turned away. And for the first time in longer than he could honestly account for, the world was exactly the right size.